to be reminded every day that when you wake up and you're not in a hospital bed, you're not hearing the beeping, you're not having an IV attached to you, you don't have to call a nurse to go to the bathroom. For me, that's a moment of gratitude every morning.
Welcome to the 11th episode of our new podcast, the CHC Podcast. I am Anna Jaworski and a heart mom to an adult with a single ventricle heart. I have two co-hosts with me today.
Hi, I'm Annie Olchak, and I'm a CHD patient.
Hi, I'm Guy Simkin, and I'm a CHD patient.
I am so excited for Annie and Guy to take over the interview portion of this episode. I'll be wearing a producer's cap today, but I'll be back at the end of the meeting along with my co-producer, Erickson Beatty, to talk with Guy and Annie about what we learned from this panel discussion. Take it away, folks.
Today's town hall meeting deals with CHDs, complications, and gratitude. While it may not seem like it to many outside of the CHD community, those of us do have a great many things to be thankful for. This gratitude may be for something as simple as the love and support for their family and friends, to the groundbreaking medical treatments and surgeries that are being created and innovated as research and technology continues to improve. Our panel of guests today include Anna Marie Taylor, who was born with tetralogy of Fallot and is in congestive heart failure. Despite being in and out of doctors' offices and having multiple procedures over the course of her life, she has always stayed positive and worked hard to give back, even being a medical assistant and school nurse before having to leave that position due to her disability.
We also have Nicole Beldo today. Nicole was born with a congenital heart defect, but she didn't know anything about it until she was an adult. For years, she felt different and never seemed to keep up with everyone. When she was finally diagnosed with a congestive aortic valve, things started to make sense for her.
Our final guest is Jeannie Yancey. Jeannie Yancey is the mother of 3 adult children, including a son with a congenital heart defect. Just a few years ago, Jeannie was diagnosed with post-traumatic stress disorder, and she started therapy for her condition. Practicing mindfulness and other mental health strategies has helped her improve her outlook on life and enable her to eliminate medications she once needed to prevent anxiety attacks. What insights have you gained as a congenital heart patient with complications regarding being grateful for the life you have? Anna Marie?
What I'm most grateful for really is I have a tremendously large family. I'm one of 7. So all of my sisters have been so supportive, and my husband and extended family members. Also the science. So with my congestive heart failure, it damaged my valve. So I could not have a normal valve replacement through open heart surgery. That was eliminated for me. So when I was at the ACHA conferences, I sat in on one of the doctors' talks, and they were talking about how there's this new valve procedure that they could do through catheter. And as soon as I heard that, I'm like, oh, this is for me, right? And my cardiologist happened to be sitting next to me, and I talked to her about it, and she's like, we can evaluate you and see. And sure enough, I was able to get that valve within a year of seeing that doctor's conference. So I'm eternally grateful for how far science has come. And I'm really hoping that at some point they will be able to take a person's DNA and create a heart for them. That's what my ultimate goal, because the next open heart surgery I'd be looking at would be transplant. And if the science could get there to where anti-rejection medications aren't needed because it is basically your own heart, oh, that would be such an amazing moment.
I couldn't agree with you more, Anna Marie. That's amazing.
Thank you.
Nicole, what insights have you gained as a CHD patient regarding being grateful for the life you have, especially in the light of the fact that you've just only recently discovered you have a heart defect?
These days, I feel like I'm living life 2.0. Growing up I was always one of the kids that didn't do well in gym class. I was not great with anything cardio. And I just have chalked it up my entire life. The fact that I'm a little fussy, not realizing that it was because my heart just was not necessarily functioning correctly. And I'm grateful for the way things happened. I was in the process of buying a house the beginning part of last year. I closed on the house, and within 3 weeks, when my symptoms really became apparent and I knew something was wrong. So I was very lucky in that I had the job, I had the house, and wasn't necessarily that big a deal at the time that I ended up in the hospital, even though my first thought was, am I going to be able to keep the job that I had only had for 6 months? Am I going to be able to keep the house? But my employer really stepped up and made sure that I had a job to come back to. And I had great coworkers who donated, time to me because I wasn't eligible for any sort of medical leave from the company. And then I had really great friends who came in and unpacked my house and made sure that things were in order and accepted furniture delivery so that when I got home from the hospital, the only thing that I needed to do was focus on my healing and getting back to where I was a couple of years ago, feeling human again.
Nicole, I'm really glad that everything turned out the way you did. And I'm really happy that nothing got uprooted from your job and your life. I'm really thankful that you shared that with us.
Thank you. Me too. They say it takes a village. And in this case, I have a really good one.
I think you do. Jeannie, what insights have you gained as a CHC parent and regarding being grateful for the life you have?
Early on in our heart journey, I decided to notice positive experiences each day because I noticed that when I have gratitude for the simplest things like a beautiful sunset, a day or a week without a trip to the doctor's office, or just even one boring or uneventful day, I could make it through difficult times knowing that it could always be worse. I really think that my gratitude leads me to feeling blessed for having a grateful heart.
Thank you, Jeannie. That was very poignant. It was very insightful looking at the way life has been treating you.
Thank you.
Nicole, how has having a CHD encouraged you to volunteer in the CHD community and help others?
It was mainly looking to find a community and others who had either been through what I had been through or getting ready to go through what I had gone through, because my friends and family are great, but they just don't understand the ins and outs of my specific experience. And in some of the groups I've been involved with, mostly on Facebook, there are a lot of adults that are just now getting diagnosed with my specific condition, the cuspid aortic valve, who are shocked that they had no clue. They've gone through their entire life and they're in their 40s and 50s and now getting diagnosed. And it helped them to hear from me to say, yep, I had no clue until a week before my surgery. And I made it through with flying colors. I'm a year out. My heart function is back to normal. And for the most part, I live a normal life. I've not really had to give up that much that I was doing prior to. I'm no longer allowed to do certain things, lift heavy weights and whatnot, but I'm on track to live a healthy, normal life.
Yeah, that's wonderful. People need all sorts of support, whether they were born with a congenital heart condition that they found early in life or later in life. And knowing that there's somebody out there in the community that's helping those who find out later in life that they have a CHD, such as BAV, bicuspid aortic valve. That's wonderful. Thank you. Jeannie, can you tell us what mindfulness has done for your peace of mind and what other techniques you use to remain grateful and calm?
Yes, living with uncertainty has definitely taken a toll on me throughout the years, especially when my son has a difficult test coming up, like a medical test or some kind of a procedure. A few years ago, I didn't really know how I was going to get through each day or week with the random panic attacks I was experiencing. I was going to college at the time, and it was difficult to get through just class or trying to think of how I'm going to get home from school. Am I going to have a panic attack on the train and nobody's going to be able to help me? It was quite concerning with what I was going through at the time. I tried medicine to start with, and I didn't really like the side effects. It made me lightheaded, off balance, tired. I just didn't feel confident about even going out of the house. So I started attending a mindfulness group therapy session because that's what my doctor had prescribed. So I thought I would try it. And only after a few sessions, I began to notice that I felt less anxiety and I learned how to focus on something besides the issue in front of me. So when I practice mindfulness, it helps me feel mentally and emotionally better and stay much calmer.
That's wonderful. Yes. It's great to see that your doctor was willing to think outside the box and try an alternative besides medication. Those tend to help patients, but they also help the parents of patients, as you had described. Thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Anna Marie, you made a point of telling us in your guest intake form that you believe helping your body in motion is important for your mental health. Can you tell us more about that?
Yes. Growing up, I don't know how many years ago it was, but it was this commercial for some healthcare company. It's on the radio too. The body in motion stays in motion. And I take that to heart because I feel like if you keep your body moving, no matter how little of activity you're doing, as long as you're trying to do something, it can help your mind as well as your body physically. Just keep your body moving, even if it's going for a 10-minute walk. When I was in the hospital with endocarditis and a severe staph infection, I still did laps around the nurse's station because my body in motion stays in motion. And to help me keep the peace, knowing that, okay, there's nothing else to do in the hospital but get up and walk around if you can. It just kept playing in my head. A body in motion stays in motion. And it's been like a little mantra that really helps me out a lot of the time.
That's beautiful, especially since we know when CHD patients are in the hospital, they suffer a lot of depression, anger, sadness, and you sharing your ability to try to fight that and break through it really will help a lot of other patients see that there are other ways that they can move in the hospital. Thank you.
Yes. You're welcome. Thank you.
What advice do you have for others in the CHC community with other medical conditions like you have, Jeannie?
I agree with what Anna Marie was saying about moving, but also one of the things that I think is important is to take time for yourself, even if it's just 5 to 10 minutes. Because during those breaks, you can do something like meditating or walking outside, take some deep breaths in the fresh air outside and look around at your surroundings and just find as many things as you can to be thankful for, such as having the break that you're taking, just being able to breathe on your own. The pandemic made all of us appreciate being able to just breathe. And then when you're done, thank yourself for taking the time for yourself. And then it'll get easier as time goes by, the more you do it. Knowing that self-love is not selfish is also helpful because we can all learn to love ourselves a little bit more, and we can't really lift somebody else unless we're on the higher ground.
Thank you, Jeannie. That was very insightful. I really appreciated the fact that you went off of what Anna Marie said. Thank you for sharing again.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Anna Marie, what are your thoughts?
I would think the most important advice I would give CHD patients and others with other medical conditions is do not be afraid to reach out to your doctor. Even if you feel like, oh, this isn't nothing, there's no reason I should be contacting them, send them a message. They have all kinds of ways of getting in touch with them. Personally, love my chart. I can send my doctor a message at any point in time. And I always keep in the back of my head that, you know what? They're going to look at this and respond to it as needed. So if they think that I need to be seen, they're going to contact me and tell me, hey, why don't you make an appointment? We want to see you sooner rather than later, considering if I have a doctor's appointment in 6 months and this symptom popped up, let's go ahead and get you in earlier. So no matter what you're feeling, if it's a new symptom, if it's a prolonged symptom, don't feel bashful. Don't feel like you're bugging them. Reach out to your doctor and contact them. That would be my biggest piece of advice.
I agree. I'm in contact with my doctors as well. Nicole, what's your response to the question?
Mine is similar to Jeannie and Anna Marie, but I would add that you are your own best advocate. You know your body. You know that there's some type of problem. From the time that my PCP initially found that I had a heart murmur, it was 3 weeks until I landed in the hospital. My first trip to the ER, they told me it was anxiety and to go home and wait for my cardiologist appointment the following week. And then 36 hours later, I was back with chest pains. And at that point, I was already in the early stages of heart failure. And at that point, they decided to believe that there really was a problem. I wasn't just being anxious over the fact that I had a cardiologist appointment the following week. And then the other thing, and I can only speak to the individuals that have the bicuspid aortic valve that are waiting for surgery, is the waiting is truly the hardest part. I was blessed in that I only had to wait a week. So I only had a week to really think about what was going to happen and what was going to go on. But once I was on the other side of it, it was 100% better.
Thank you, Nicole. I also had a couple valves put in before my transplant. I understand the waiting game very well.
I want to thank the panelists for sharing. And when we come back, it'll be time for the town hall audience to ask questions or share their experiences with us.
The CHC Congenital Heart Conversations podcast is a presentation of Hearts Unite the Globe, or HUG, and is part of the HUG Podcast Network. HUG is a nonprofit organization devoted to providing resources to the congenital heart defect community to enrich the lives of our community members. For free CHD resources, please visit our website at congenitalheartdefects.com.
You are listening to the CHC Podcast. If you have a question or comment that you would like addressed on our show, please send an email to Anna Jaworski at anna@thechcpodcast.com. That's anna@thechcpodcast.com. Now, back to the CHC Podcast.
Welcome back. We're talking about gratitude in this town hall meeting. And now, which our audience is able to share their experiences and ask questions of our panelists.
Welcome to Frank Jaworski, one of our patrons.
Thanks, Annie. I actually wanted to ask Jeannie a question about her other children. How did they handle having their sibling go through these surgeries?
I'm not really sure. They were very supportive. They didn't really tell me how they felt, so I'm not sure how I can answer that question. I might have to think about that.
Okay. How about your husband? Did he handle it the same way you did? Has he had anxiety problems too?
He had a lot of anxiety problems. He handled it a lot different than I did. He just stepped away and didn't really get involved and let me just handle it all because he thought I could handle it better. And he didn't really get to know much about his heart or what was going on. He just left it up to me and just trusted me. We recently got divorced because I just didn't feel he was really connected in the whole journey.
I'm sorry to hear that. That's very hard to deal with. I know that a lot of families with heart children have stresses like that. A good friend of mine lost her son to a heart defect, and she wound up being divorced from her husband also. Anna Marie, you said that your husband has been very supportive of you. So what kind of things does he do? Does he educate himself in what you're going through in terms of your medical care, the science of it?
Actually, surprisingly, yes. When we started dating in high school, his mom was a nurse. She was an LVN. And when she found out I had a heart condition, she actually opened up one of her books. And she was explaining to him, do you actually know what's really wrong with her? Like, she was wanting to educate him. And I think that's where it started. And there's a lot of times where, especially because I have a pacemaker and defibrillator. And so sometimes when the doctor's explaining things, my husband's an electrician. So he will leave and like, okay, wait, what did that mean? He's okay, this, and this does this. And I'm like, okay. So there are some times where I feel like he doesn't understand what I'm going through, but that's normal because unless you're a CHD patient, you're not going to understand the tiredness that you feel or other things to that nature. But he really does do his best to understand and actually educate himself. So I'm very happy about that.
Yeah, I totally get that. I'm a nurse, and I was working as an adult ICU nurse when Alex was born, and I have worked really hard to understand, because adult critical care versus pediatric critical care is a whole different field, and I've learned a lot. So
Yes,
I
it is.
appreciate that he uses his own professional experience to try to understand better what you're going through.
Yeah, it is a blessing. Thank you.
Cool.
I'm wondering, Frank, if you can share with us, as a nurse who has worked with a lot of people in the EP lab and who has seen people come in, patients who have bicuspid aortic valves, if you wanted to share anything or ask a question of Nicole regarding her condition.
Well, I could, but honestly, working electrophysiology lab, the way we commonly describe it is that electrophysiology lab, EP lab, is different from cath lab. Cath lab is about plumbing. It's about the function of the vessels and the valves. And EP lab is about the wiring. I don't do cases involving aortic valve replacement and that sort of thing, transcatheter valve replacement. So I can't relate directly to that. I can definitely relate to the electrophysiology parts of it, the EP parts of it. But Nicole, the best way I can relate to what you've gone through is for myself. How would I feel if I had the age of 40, suddenly discovered that I had not just a heart problem, but a congenital heart defect that I had my whole life and hadn't known about? After Alex was diagnosed, the whole family went through evaluation to see if we had a left-sided heart defect also. And none of us did, but it was a possibility, and it's a scary thought.
After I was diagnosed, both of my siblings needed to be scanned, and depending on the results of their scan, their children may have needed to be scanned. And as fate would have it, I am the lucky unicorn. Nobody else has it in the family. Unfortunately, both of my parents have. We know for sure that my dad did not have it. He had an extensive cardiac history that was not hereditary in any way. And the surgeon and my cardiologist assured me that if he had a bicuspid aortic valve, it would have been found in all of the various testing he had done. And unfortunately, my mom passed away from cancer when I was 5. So we don't know if that's where mine came from or if I just happened to have an anomaly and just ended up with it at that point.
Yeah. I would hope that there's a program in place where they track these kinds of things across generations through families and try to figure out what the hereditary factors are.
I think that's an important point, if I can jump in here. My older daughter, as an adult, she started realizing she was having some palpitations or something and concerned. And so she went through testing and she ended up finding out she has a heart defect also, but not as serious as my son's. I'm relating to what you guys are saying.
So did she have a rhythm problem?
Yeah, it was some kind of a rhythm problem. So she had to wear the Holter monitor for a while. She didn't go into detail and tell me all the details because she's more of a private person, but she did tell me that she did find a heart defect and she's watching it closely.
It's good that she's aware. And that's the biggest thing, is if you have any kind of health problem, if you're aware of it and you're monitoring it, that's a big part of it.
And it's fortunate that she's an EMT studying to be a paramedic, because she has all of those people around her all the time, so that if something arises, she's got a lot of people there to make sure that she gets the help she needs.
Yeah. And I would suggest, as a former paramedic myself, that she should tell her partner that if anything happens and if I get lightheaded or pass out, take it seriously.
Totally. She does tell her partner more than she tells her mother. She doesn't want me to worry. She knows me really well.
I understand that point of view.
Many thanks to our patron, Frank Jaworski, for sharing his experiences. We'll take a short break and be right back.
Anna Jaworski has written several books to empower the congenital heart defect, or CHD, community. These books can be found at Amazon.com or at her website, www.babyheartspress.com. Her bestseller is The Heart of a Mother, an anthology of stories written by women for women in the CHD community. Anna's other books, My Brother Needs an Operation, The Heart of a Father, and Hypoplastic Left Heart Syndrome, a handbook for parents, will help you understand that you are not alone. Visit babyheartspress.com to find out more.
This content is not intended to be a substitute for professional medical advice, diagnosis, or treatment. The opinions expressed in the podcast are not those of Hearts Unite the Globe, but of the hosts and guests, and are intended to spark discussion about issues pertaining to congenital heart disease or bereavement.
Welcome back. Now it's time for Anna Jaworski and Ayrton Beatty to talk about this episode with Guy and me. Anna is a heart mom to an adult with a single ventricle heart who is post-Fontan, and Ayrton is a patient with drug-induced long QT syndrome, and she's bereaved of her brother Edward, who was born with an undiagnosed CHD, which claimed his life. They were working behind the scenes during the town hall.
What did you guys think about the show? Anna, we'll start with you.
Oh my goodness, I found it so interesting. I'm really glad we had a heart mom as well as two adults with congenital heart defects. This season, we've really focused mostly on the adults with congenital heart disease, but I thought it was really good to have a mom in the mix too, because I think the CHD has a ripple effect. It doesn't only affect the person who was born with the condition, but it really does touch everybody in the family. So I was really happy Jeannie came on and shared with us her experience. And then, oh my goodness, Jeannie, I didn't know that your daughter discovered that she has something going on too. So I think that's one of our concerns as a heart parent, is that maybe something else is going on with our other kids and we just don't know about it. I remember being so worried about my older son, even though he was an athlete and he seemed to be doing great. I was so afraid he might have an undiagnosed condition. And it wasn't until he had an in-depth echocardiogram and I was allowed to be in the room and watch it. And I saw all of his heart parts were perfect. They were textbook perfect. It was the first time I had seen an echo where everything looked so perfect. I made it out to the parking lot before I burst into tears. I didn't realize how much stress I was holding in just regarding that.
Thank you for your insight, Anna. As an uncle, one of my nieces was in the womb and was being tested to find out she also had a congenital heart defect. Gladly, she did not. I understand where you're coming from and all of the parents from their point of view, because my parents, I don't think that they did the same thing that you and Frank did for your son. Ayrton, what did you think about the show?
I found it really interesting as well. Obviously, with losing my brother through a heart condition, I know my mum pushed really hard to get me tested. Whether or not they would have picked up the fact that I had the genetic marker to get this long QT syndrome through medication, I don't know. But because my siblings and I were all adopted from different biological parents, the doctors were like, there was no point. But when I started feeling ill, I was just constantly pushing the doctors because I knew something was wrong. And like Jeannie as well, I've also been through mindfulness to help with PTSD, but that was to do with an abusive relationship. Even now, I do find that really helpful when I feel anxiety in certain situations. It does help ease the levels. It does help bring the anxiety levels back down. It helps keep me calmer.
Ayrton, I'm really glad that you shared, and I feel really sorry that you went through all of the stuff you went through. But I think you've turned out to be a wonderful person because of the adversity that you went through, and I find that amazing about you.
So what did you think about the show, Annie?
I found it quite interesting, I have to say. There's a lot that was running through my head with my own congenital heart experiences and thinking about my parents and my younger brother and how they experienced it and how I continue to move forward with the things and complications that occur and the mindfulness as well as the keep moving part. I'm getting back to that and hearing you guys talk about it, Jeannie and Anna Marie. just reminds me how important it is to, while my body can move and function like my normal, to make it do it, not be as sedentary as I've become, unfortunately. And then, Nicole, it's always good to have these things where we are able to continue educating. And I think that's where all three of our guests is the learning, educating, and then advocating. And thank you. It was beautiful.
I know that's what I loved about our guests as well, is they're in completely different places. Anna Marie, like you, grew up with it. Nicole found out much later in life. And then Jeannie is like Frank and me. She's the parent. And yet, even though all three of them were in such very different places regarding congenital heart disease, they all shared a lot of commonalities, wouldn't you say?
Yes.
I agree.
And what about
I-
you, Guy? What did you think about the show?
I found it completely insightful from the point of view that we were hearing from three different people of three different generations, from Jeannie being the hard mom, the hard parent, and from Anne Marie and Nicole as being patient. Anne Marie, your story really made me think more about what things I could do for myself, but I'm also like Annie, and sometimes in that solitary place, which I don't want to be in as much as I am now. And Nicole, when I found out that you just found out like Kirsten did, I was shocked. Because I've never met people like you and Eric did who found out later in life they had a congenital heart defect, and I'm surprised by it.
Yeah, I was surprised to see so many people recently. It feels like in our CHC Podcast Facebook page, it seems like we're getting more and more adults who are finding out later in life that they have a congenital heart defect. And as we get older, we assume heart defects with acquired heart disease. So I think that has been surprising for me too. Ayrton, what surprised you the most about the episode?
I think it's just Virginia thinking about it from my mum's perspective. So one of the hardest things for me was telling my mum that I also had a heart condition. I never thought about how it would feel for her, knowing that she had another child with a heart condition after losing one that had been undiagnosed.
Yeah, that had to be hard for her, Ayrton. Your whole family, I'm sure, is still reeling from having lost Edward. So that would be rough. I think it's good that you had a chance to listen to another heart mom and that you had that insight. I think that's valuable. I hope she'll listen to this episode, and I hope maybe you'll get a chance to talk to her about it and just let her know how it makes you feel to know that this has affected her life as well. I think we spend more time focusing on the patient, as we should, because the patients are in potentially life-threatening situations, but it definitely does have a ripple effect, and it does affect the parents as well.
Yeah, and now I'm obviously in a position of worrying about her heart condition, which is completely unrelated to mine. We had to have this back and forth thing going.
I know, as we get older, it's funny. We become caretakers of our own parents. I know that I was for my mom the last couple of years of her life. She moved back to Texas, and I was her major caretaker. And here, I foolishly thought I knew a lot of stuff about the heart. And I did know about my child's specific congenital heart condition. And I knew some things about other people's, but I really didn't understand acquired heart disease until my mom moved back. And my mom had acquired heart disease. And all of a sudden, I learned so much more about AFib and arrhythmias and high blood pressure and what that can do to the heart. And it's totally different than the congenital heart conditions.
Yeah, my mum's AFib with low blood pressure. And because she has a history of strokes as well.
It's concerning.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Annie, what surprised you the most about this episode?
I think for me, it was when Jeannie was telling us that she didn't know how her other children felt when her son with the congenital heart defect. I know kids tend to be very quiet and not always explain or tell things to their parents about how they feel. And sometimes I think that maybe now people are more open with their talking, and it's still really tough. I know my younger brother, he still, to this day, anytime something goes wrong or I have to go to the hospital, he panics inside. He panics wondering, could this be it? Will I not come out? And he's done that since he was a very young toddler, looking for me when I wouldn't be there because of surgeries. And with generations as they've gotten old, people have learned about speaking and talking and being more open. It was just surprising to see that maybe they haven't now processed it, or maybe they still need to process it. And then maybe they need some type of ability to be able to get that out. Maybe they don't. Maybe they seem to be fine where they have already processed it. They feel comfortable with where they're at. And I know for my own brother, he's not comfortable. He still has to process it all these 42 years later. And so I'm just curious to know if maybe, especially if the daughter's private, if the rest of them must be private, to know if maybe they've expressed anything, especially as their brother gets older. And unfortunately, as we know, complications will arise.
Yes, I think everybody's responses surprised me at how much I could relate to everyone's comments, because every piece I could relate to, because we've been through this for so long. It's been almost 21 years. Or if you think about being pre-diagnosed, it actually has been just barely over 21 years. Being that long in this journey, I can completely relate with so many things that people have said, because with the congenital hearts being the most common birth defect, there's so many people around us that are going through all kinds of different pieces that are like what everybody has just mentioned. For example, like what Ayrton said about her brother passing away from an undiagnosed heart defect. I had a nephew that was related by marriage, so he wasn't blood related, but he died as a teenager and didn't know of his heart defect, and he passed away from that. That was pretty shocking, having somebody who you thought was healthy pass away suddenly, not knowing that they had a heart defect. From the autopsy, they did find he did have a congenital heart defect, and he died from an enlarged heart. So I can completely relate to a lot of those different things. As I thought about like how my kids have felt, they didn't really express their feelings a lot, only sometimes maybe saying the things that they missed out on because of the whole thing. But they tell me as an adult that they're grateful for a lot of the experiences they had, because it gave them the empathy that they need as an adult to just make it through life. I can relate with everything that everybody said. And this was a really great podcast because I learned a lot from the different people.
Thank you, Jeannie. That was beautiful. And the fact that they are able to express that they have this sympathy and empathy towards others as they've grown up because of their experience in living at home with a congenital heart patient. That's beautiful, and something that gives me hope when you have other people out there who may have experienced it, that they'll be open and understanding when a person can't walk as fast or when they're having issues and it might be embarrassing because they're out in public, that there are people who are going to help and be sympathetic to what's going on around them.
Yeah, I love that, Annie. That's so true. It makes me think of one of the early episodes I did in Heart to Heart with Anna, gosh, almost 10 years ago. My friend Caroline Robinson was on my podcast, and she had Eisenmenger syndrome. So she had pulmonary hypertension, which means she couldn't walk very far, and she had a handicap sticker on her car so she could park closer to the stores. And sometimes people would say horrible things to her. Oh, you're fine. Was that your mother's sticker or your father's sticker? How dare you park there? And it was because of her. And what these people didn't know was that at night when she went home, she slept on oxygen. She really had a hard time getting around. And she and I talked about how congenital heart disease is an invisible illness. And a lot of times people don't see it. And she was embarrassed to park in that parking spot, but she knew that she couldn't go into the store, especially if it was a mall, and get her shopping done without parking closer because she wouldn't make it to the car afterwards when she was done shopping. And part of the reason why I started my podcast and why I'm continuing to do it 10 years later and have grown from one podcast to 4 podcasts that I'm working with is because I feel that we need to continue to talk about congenital heart disease. We need to have this as a conversation in general society because just like Jeannie said, this is the #1 birth defect. And there are still so many people out there that don't know about congenital heart disease and don't understand how many people are affected by having a heart defect.
It's so true, Anna, from what you just said, if I may, only because I know I had found out many years ago that HLHS now is on the disability forms, that I could actually get a disability sticker as well for my car. And I thought about it and I was like, because the scar is behind my clothes, I can't exactly wear open clothes all the time and writes, have a congenital heart defect all over my face. And then I remember joking around with a friend saying, God, no one would believe that I look ill. I'd have to probably drag a leg or do something to make it look like I'm not well so that people don't think I'm lying. Yeah, no, we appreciate that you've started something like this and have done what you can to make people aware that this is an invisible disease and there are a lot of people suffering from it. Hopefully, more and more people, as they listen, realize just the simple things of understanding, and even if they don't get it, but just be sympathetic behind that something is going on. So thank you.
I've actually had that experience personally. I put off getting a handicap placard for years and years because I'm like, I don't really need it. I don't need it. And then there came to a point where I'm like, okay, I'll get one. And I will find myself sometimes I will park and my scar's in the front, but people are not going to see that. So I'm like, I find myself limping a little bit to be like, no, there is something visibly wrong with me. See,
Yeah,
I can't walk very well because I will get dirty looks. And
Yes.
and at one point on the back of my car, I got a bumper sticker and it had very evil eyes. And then below it, it said, I don't look disabled. You don't look ignorant. There you
Wow.
go.
Yeah,
Oh my
exactly.
gosh. Wow.
Because I feel so bad because I look normal. I don't look like there's anything wrong with me. Heck, I walk normal and I will go and park in a handicapped spot on days where I'm like, I feel an extra tired. Especially if the parking lot is completely full. And yeah, I always feel like people are watching me. And now I'm at the point where in my 40s, I have officially stopped caring about some things. And that's one thing I don't care about. In fact, I'm almost at a point in life where I'm like, I dare you to say something. Say something.
true.
I will
I
give you
love
the
that.
education. Say
It
it.
is so true. It's I dare you. Yep.
Right? No, I'm
Yeah.
at the point in my
Listen,
life
get
where I'm
yourself
like,
a
dare
cane.
me.
Get yourself a cane. It's instant sympathy.
Yeah, exactly. As we drag our bodies with the cane.
No, I welcome that comment now. I'm like, yes, please say it because I will educate you. I have no problem opening up my shirt showing I have defibrillator scars on both sides of my chest, plus the one down the center. I'm like, I have no problem going, yeah, there's nothing wrong with me. You see all these scars? Yeah. Oh, 4 open heart surgeries. Come at me. What are you going to say? Make them
That's
feel
awesome.
horrible.
That is awesome. Thank you,
Yeah.
Anna Marie. Really appreciate it.
So I'm like, and get the handicap stickers if you can, because it really does help out on the days where you're just extra super tired and you're like, I just don't have it in me. Because there have been some days where I'm like, you know what? I'm too tired to go to the store. I'm just going to go home. And I haven't gone to the store just because it's too much to walk. I'm good. And get it. It makes a difference.
Yes. Yes. Now, on that note, team, what was your biggest takeaway from the show? Anna, what are your thoughts?
When we decided that we were going to do this show, we wanted to do a show on gratitude. And we thought this was something that we wanted to show people that you can be grateful, even when you're dealing with congenital heart disease, and especially when you're dealing with congenital heart disease and other complications. Because as Annie and I have said repeatedly, the older we get, the more complications we have. Whether we have a heart defect or not, you're going to get more complications, Jenny. So we were looking for people who had specific extra conditions. And I think what I loved and what was the biggest takeaway for me was that gratitude and positivity, those feelings are choices that we make. And I love how Jeannie shared that it was the mindfulness meditations that she has been doing, taking that 5 minutes a day just to go outside and breathe. Jeannie, for me, it's my garden. When I am in my garden, I am in my happy place. I stick my hands in the ground. I listen to a podcast, or sometimes I don't listen to anything except for the birds singing. That's the relief I need from the pressures of the daily grind to keep me in my happy place so that I can continue doing the work that I feel God wants me to do. So I loved how you shared that, and Anna Marie, how she shared keeping her body in motion. I just turned 60 this year, and Anna Marie, it is harder to keep myself in motion nowadays than what it used to be when I was in my 20s, 30s, or 40s. But you're right. I find that when I do force myself to get up and move around more, that makes me feel better. So I need to keep my body in motion. And then, Nicole, I've just been so inspired by you, Nicole, since the minute I met you, that you had this really horrific diagnosis at a really challenging time in your life when you're buying a house and you have this new job. And yet you've been so positive and reached out and been such an influential part of this podcast. You've been a volunteer since the very beginning, and you've always been striving to reach out to help other people. So I'm grateful to know all of you and to be part of this episode.
So beautiful. Ayrton, what do you think?
Yeah, I just think this episode's been an incredibly important reminder that there are always more things to be thankful for in life, even if it's just for the family and friends you have around you when you're going through something incredibly challenging, such as living with a congenital heart defect.
Thank you so much. Guy, any takeaways here from you?
I do. I'm really glad that we all found something unique and complimentary about each other. And Ayrton, about your mom, I've also had 3 strokes, 2 during surgery, 1 afterwards. So I understand the whole stroke situation. So I understand it and I sympathize with it. Believe me, I've gone through it 3 times. It's not a pretty picture. Because of that, it enhanced the attention deficit disorder that I was born with. And it also created a lot of neurological impairments for me as well, like my speech and my fine and close motor problems. I really appreciated everything everyone else said. Jeannie, how you are very mindful and how you're no longer feeling PTSD from what you went through. And I find that very compelling. And Marie, from your point of view, I've had probably 5 ICDs with mechanical valves. I understand where you're coming from as well. Nicole, you're the unicorn of the group. I really admire what you've gone through and how you're coming out the other end now. Thanks for opening up about that.
We don't normally do this, but I'm wondering if there is a takeaway that our guests would like to share before we close the programs. Just wondering if you all would like to share your biggest takeaway. And I'll start with you, Jeannie.
Thank you, Anna. One of the things that I really can appreciate is how empowering it is when you're being around people who are grateful and have that kind of attitude. I just think having a positive attitude strengthens us. I think that's the overall thing that I got from this, is just having a positive attitude helps you get through anything.
Yeah, I agree. And I think it's so smart to surround yourself with other people who also practice mindfulness and gratefulness. It's so easy to surround yourself with negative people. And then I find when I'm around negative people, it brings me down, even though typically I'm a really optimistic person. So I think that was very insightful. What about you, Anna Marie?
I was thinking about my siblings and growing up and how stuff was for them. I know my older sister has made comments along the way. We have a great relationship now, but growing up, it was hard because my parents were told that I could die at any time. I probably wouldn't live to see my 20s and whatnot. I'm the one that had the birthday parties. I didn't have to go outside and go in the garden. I didn't have to do PE. I know my siblings kind of have some resentfulness for how I grew up and how they grew up. And now that they're adults, our relationship, like I said, is good. But I do know there are still those unresolved, resentful feelings that they have. It is nothing I can do about it now, but I try and be an awesome auntie to their kids. So maybe that was in the past and hopefully they have gotten over it over the years. But until you can really talk about it, there's no telling if they ever did. So that's what kind of got me thinking of if they still have any of those resentful feelings, which I'm pretty sure they did because it was our whole lives growing up. I was in and out of the hospital.
It would be interesting for you to have that conversation with your siblings and to say, I'm so aware now, but how would any of you have known? And your parents didn't know either. You are one of the pioneers. You're one of the older survivors. So we parents didn't know if our kids would make it. And we were told, your child can't do this. Don't let your child cry. We were told to be overprotective. Really. That was the only way we could be for you guys to make it to adulthood.
I didn't do PE in school. I got out of all of it, all years of PE, even through high school. So there was a lot of kid gloves handled with me because she can't be around sick people because you don't know what's going to happen if she gets sick. And it was an interesting way of growing up. And it is what it is.
And what about you, Nicole? What was your biggest takeaway? All of this is a little bit new for you compared to the rest of us who have been living with CHD for decades.
I think that I'm in a slightly unique position because I participated in the background of a lot of our podcasts. So the biggest takeaway for me has always been I love hearing everybody else's stories because it lets me see that I'm not alone in this world. Even though I only just found out about a year ago, mine is very different. Mine has been very simple, and I am very grateful for that. But I still like to hear the stories of hope and how you can be grateful, even though you might have something going on that's not very good in your life or at the present moment.
Absolutely. I'm so glad that you were here, and I'm so glad you finally agreed to be a guest on the program. It's about time. We almost went the whole year without getting a chance to hear from you and your story, aside from when we had the talkback section. So I'm really glad you made it on as a panelist.
Yeah, thank you, Nicole. This is wonderful.
It's been both fun and terrifying.
You survived. And then I would just like to finish up on my biggest takeaway for a moment. When you think about congenital heart defects and the ripples, as Anna said, and how it affects not just the patient themselves, but the immediate family and then the friends and then the strangers and so forth, to be reminded every day that when you wake up and you're not in a hospital bed, you're not hearing the beeping, you're not having an IV attached to you, you don't have to call a nurse to go to the bathroom. For me, that's a moment of gratitude every morning. Not having that worry of, do they have to change my IV today? Can I walk fine? Or what's my heart going to do? Is the medication going to make me feel worse? Is it going to make me feel better? All the questions and the fears that you have throughout. And like Jeannie had said, just having that positive attitude, even on the tough days. And trust me, I have my tough days. There are days I can be very salty. But reminding myself, I get to wake up. I get to see my cat. I get to see my family, my friends, the people I love. I get to go and work a full-time job. I was fortunate to live a mainly normal life having a congenital heart defect. It's those little pieces. Just remember that we're all here together. We're all dealing and facing with a lot of these issues, and one step at a time for those hardest days, I have to say. It's what it is to remember, one step at a time. So I would like to thank you all for joining us today on the CHC Podcast. We hope you'll join us next month for our last episode of the season. And we'll be talking about the holidays. Until then, I'm Annie Alchak.
And I'm Guy Shimkay. Have a great day and keep those congenital heart conversations going on Facebook, TikTok, and Instagram.
We hope you'll join us next month for our last episode of the season.
Thank you for joining us. The CHC Podcast can be heard monthly wherever you get your podcasts. Visit us on Facebook or Instagram to continue the conversations. Join the Hearts Unite the Globe Patreon group and become part of our town hall meetings. It's simple. Just visit www.heartsunitetheglobe.org and select the tab that says Donate to Hug with Patreon. Then you too can be part of the conversation.